if you were to introduce a post-scarcity economy into the world today, you'd have a big, huge, just ginormous mess on your hands. Everybody's going to be like, hey, I don't have to work anymore. Screw this. I'm just going to sit around and watch Netflix and do absolutely nothing and drink a bunch of beer.
If you free people up from doing these menial jobs, if you free people up from worrying where they're going to get their next meal tomorrow, you might find the next Elon Musk getting us to space.
In the 20th century, we went from women with these massive hoop dresses riding these funky looking bicycles to connecting the world by airplane
and the
on
internet.
our basis, and the internet. The internet was one of the probably the major things that we've ever done as a society, I think.
You could say, well, it would be nice if we did this or did that, and that's good, but it requires some prerequisites. And the whole energy thing, the replicators, that kind of thing, those are prerequisites to making the next big jump. Welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we would really love it if you would like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. That'd be great.
And I'm just a nobody. My name's Casey Rochford. I'm on the show too, I guess. Sometimes when I want to be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we write.
Get out of here. You're fired.
We write awesome music. It's at the end of the show. You can get it at patreon.com/KSMVidcast. Look at that. I'm in announcer mode now. All right. So we've got a repeat guest with us. You may remember our little debate on what the best Star Trek was. We would like to welcome back Randy Jones, and we're going to talk a little more Star Trek today.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. And that music, by the way, is awesome at the end and well worth the wait.
Well, thank you.
Glad you like it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I saw an interesting article a while back, and it got me to thinking, the economics of Star Trek are rather interesting because, for a host of reasons in the show, they have come to a point where they're considered what is called post-scarce, where they've got an abundance of things and nobody needs work or money. Like, they can work as they please. They do it for self-fulfillment, betterment of society, but they don't do it to necessarily acquire vast amounts of wealth. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk about whether or not that's feasible, since pretty much everything else Star Trek has predicted has come true.
Well, except warp drive and transporters.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, there are.
It's far more feasible for post-scarcity than warp drive at this point, I think. But
yeah, well, let me just start off by saying, like, my personal thought on that is in the Star Trek world, the only way, well, all of the economy and that entire system in Star Trek, the post-scarcity kind of element, is entirely dependent on the existence of the replicator. Mm-hmm. Randy, what do you think about that? Like, is
that was actually a point that I was going to make. I've got a little list on my other monitor up there, and that gets us into a conversation of a hypothetical energy economy. Mm-hmm. But, we're in the 21st century right now, not the 23rd or the 24th. And so, we've got 3D printers that can print nylon.
I got one back there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. They can print nylon, they can print metal and stuff. We've got fabrication devices that can machine out parts for, airplanes and other high technology things. But an energy economy would depend upon a true replicator, a matter energy conversion process. And I was doing some reading, and I was talking with another friend of mine who goes back to high school days also. And we were going through this in some pretty good detail. It's like, here we are, let's say it's the 24th century and we're traveling around and we've got this big, huge starship, and we come across a merchant vessel and he's in distress and he needs a new part. I'm like, well, okay, guess what? We can replicate that for you and you can go off on your way. Same thing, I guess, would be for like a human civilization where you could replicate just about everything from food, which they make comments in Star Trek like, wait, you're using real food instead of, eating the replicated stuff.
Yeah, the
And some
replicated stuff
people,
never tastes as good. That's one of the things. Like they always
well,
comment,
yeah,
it's not quite the same
exactly.
as real cake or something.
Right. Or somebody,
frosting.
throws their nose up in disgust, like, oh, that's real food. Ooh, gross. Give me the replicated slop.
Yeah.
So from food to textiles to, all the basic needs in an energy economy would require a replicator, or usage of one. I don't know if you would have one in every home. If you look at Deep Space Nine, there's a facility called like the Replimat, which is like a station on board where they can replicate pretty much anything they need for their purposes. But we don't have the energy breakthrough yet to have that much energy at our hands to actually pursue that technology at this point in time.
Well,
Yeah.
on that point, though, I would argue that the main driving factor that the replicator is providing, that probably is the underpin for this post-scarcity, is the ability to feed people without worrying about spoiling food and things like that.
Yeah, because
and we, if you look back in time, when we used to just salt food, and now we've got other forms of preservatives, and we can freeze things quite easily in transit. We're making strides, and it's not out of the realm of possibility right now with the technology we have to actually feed the entire world. Like, that's possible right now.
Yeah, it is possible.
In fact, with the food the U.S. throws away,
yeah,
we could do a lot. Obviously, it's a matter of transportation. Like, you have to get it there before it goes bad and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
When I was a kid, my grandma would say, finish your food, there's starving kids in Africa. And I was like, what are you going to do? Send my leftovers? They're going to spoil,
Yeah, exactly. Put it in a box and ship it off to...
But now you just Amazon next day the leftovers, and it's good.
Well,
put it on dry ice.
Star Trek, if there were teleporters, you could just teleport whatever you didn't need to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, if you have a replicator, we're talking... The advantage of a replicator is... the entire technology behind it is you could take garbage, stuff you don't want, and break it down to energy, and then turn it back into matter that you do want. And I think that's kind of the tipping point that would facilitate some kind of Star Trekian kind of economy. Because at that point, you don't need a medium of exchange, because you pretty much could just push a button and make anything you want. However, Randy, you did bring up something interesting, though, the point about energy. And that energy creation is probably another factor here, because it does take energy, and energy has to come from somewhere. And there's a finite amount of energy we can extract with what we know now. I mean, you have solar, wind, and nuclear, and coal, and oil, and all that stuff, geothermal, and everything. But if we were to somehow, I guess if we got to the point where we could break down things into energy and then turn energy to matter, we'd probably have nearly limitless energy. And they kind of hint at that in the Star Trek world, that the systems they have, they can extract energy from almost anywhere. It's been a while since I've read the Star Trek technical manual, but
Well,
I think
not
that,
everything was scarce or post-scarce though, because things like dilithium crystals, there was
Yeah.
fuel that was finite,
And you
and
actually couldn't replicate, I believe, dilithium and trilithium and several other heavy metals. That's why you don't have vast starship replicators in Star Trek replicating an instant starship. Although there are scenes in Deep Space Nine where it sure seems like that's the case with the massive amounts of ships they've put together. But they can fabricate the individual parts. I read there's an article. You're gonna have to like do a Google search for something like replicating starships in Star Trek. Somebody actually did a calculation to determine how many Enterprise D type warp cores it would take to produce enough energy to replicate an entire starship, and that number apparently was astronomically insane.
wow.
So there would be limits to what could be replicated. Like you could replicate food, your basic needs, clothing, cups, chairs, furniture, maybe parts of your house, maybe even small vehicles to get around in. But for larger things, it may not be. Uh, it may just take way too much energy. I don't know. I'm not an energy physicist, and so
I think it's more than just energy. There's another part in that's going to kind of tie into something else that I want to bring up, and that's when you've got to build something large and complex like a starship, or even an airplane, let's say, something in our modern times. If you're building a giant airplane, you don't necessarily want to just punch everything into a computer and have it all fabricated, because there's something to be said for humans taking their time, looking at things, passing quality assurance and stuff like that. As it's going together, you can identify problems in the design,
right. Mm-hmm.
and correct it before you've gone too far.
You're talking about Boeing.
yeah,
Maybe.
And that's a good point. That machines aren't perfect. Even the program's not going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome isn't going to be perfect every time. Machines fail and produce errors. So yeah, you're going to have people going back and correcting things and kind of hand assembling stuff.
Plus, that also creates things for people to do. Somebody might be passionate about engineering and working with their hands, and they want to see something that they created or whatever, and
I want to go back to that in a little bit, like the motivation aspect of it, because I think there could be some pitfalls with a Star Trekian economy.
Absolutely.
I think that Gene Roddenberry's vision was very good. It was very hopeful, but I think it was also maybe a little naive in its interpretation of what people would do given that kind of situation. Like, if you wanted for nothing, would you go out and actively pursue some kind of, would you be a garbage collector or a plumber?
Right. I had the same thought. Yeah.
Toilets. That's the question.
Well, there was, in that article, there was something that spoke to that, but yeah, if you want to come back to that later, we can.
Maybe we could just go into it right now. Actually,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things. This is like an excellent topic to discuss.
Yeah.
But
there was
talk
this.
about this.
Yeah, there was this idea that even though there's no like money per se, there would have to be some kind of, I don't know, like a ration or something. I don't know the exact term that they use to describe this, but basically, like, if you're supplied everything you need, you get so much, right? Well, if you do some crappy jobs, maybe then you're able to get these Federation credits or whatever to buy nice things or whatever, or things that, trinkets, or, maybe go to the next planet and buy something foreign with something that's tangible to that planet, and so it's like there is money, but it's not like integral to an economy that drives everything,
Yeah, and I think in this situation, there would certainly have to be some kind of economic system, and there probably would be, because I don't know, replicators aren't perfect, and there's going to be things that obviously they hinted at this in Star Trek itself, the non-replicated items, like original classic things made by hand, were very valuable and collectible, and people put a lot of they valued them highly. And then there were things that couldn't be replicated. So if you could say, if you had a supply of dilithium crystals, well, you could trade it for what you want. And there were other things too, medical supplies and various things. Actually, kind of a lot of stuff they couldn't actually replicate correctly.
But an effective like barter system could pretty much handle that kind of economy, you know?
Yeah, and there's issues with barter having to do with, like, you know, one person needing what the other person wants, that kind of thing. But you know, the credit system might make sense. And the way I see it, if we did reach that point, we'd kind of have a hybrid system. The basic needs of every person would probably be met. You could make food. You could make your basic household goods. You could probably 3D print a house or whatever, either robotically produce the stuff you need. Obviously, real estate is still going to be scarce. You can't get around that. Well, unless you have a starship that can travel at warp 9, then, you know, you could go to whatever planet you want.
I mean, if transporters were a thing, you wouldn't have to have compartmentalized cities. But anyway,
well, no, that's a good point. Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of real estate, I mean, if you look at some of the episodes of movies, you know, in DS9, Joe Sisko had his own restaurant in New Orleans that he presumably owned, and or was in the family. Captain Kirk had a house out in was it Idaho or something like that. That he
Cisco?
Iowa.
Well, he had an apartment
Iowa?
in San Francisco as well,
Oh, yeah.
but I think in the timeline that was like a couple of years after that, he bought this house and he had horses on there. You know, that's the horse riding scene.
Yeah.
He made a comment to Picard. He said, "I sold this house 10 years ago," because he was in the Nexus and sold. You're thinking, wait a minute, he's sold the house in a world that doesn't use money. So that kind of brings up another point. So yeah, it's like, is there money or isn't there money? And if there is, how does it really fit in? Gene Roddenberry says no money for humans, no money for Starfleet or the Federation. But you constantly see episodes where you hear, hang on a second. Quiet time.
Like Gold Press Latinum.
It was Gold Press Latinum.
Yep.
You know, Uhura buys a Tribble with credits. Sisko talks to Quark about station damages or something, and about a bill that he wasn't going to charge him. Voyager replicator rations are a big thing because they're 70,000 light years from home and they need to conserve energy.
Yeah, that's kind of a special case.
But that could take you into a perspective currency, like are credits replicator rations? Is that your incentive for doing these dirty jobs? What's that guy's name who does dirty jobs? Rowe or something like that?
Mike Rowe.
Mike Rowe, yeah. So he does all these dirty jobs that look absolutely horrible, from castrating sheep to shoveling stuff that is just nasty. And I'm not a huge fan of his for a couple of reasons, but I've seen the show, and it's like nobody wants to do that kind of work. I mean, I don't even think the average person, if you were to introduce a post-scarcity economy into the world today, you'd have a big, huge, just ginormous mess on your hands. Everybody's going to be like, hey, I don't have to work anymore. Screw this. I'm just going to sit around and watch Netflix and do absolutely nothing and drink a bunch of beer and do nothing, and life is going to be happy. And then you're going to get bored in about 2 or 3 weeks. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what I said about who cleans the toilets in Star Trek. Somebody has to do it. And you bringing up dirty jobs, actually, Mike Rowe pointed out through many episodes that a lot of these jobs, even though they're thankless and, a lot of people wouldn't volunteer to do them, they come with a certain sense of satisfaction, their own rewards.
Satisfaction, and in some cases, money that's better than flipping burgers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because when you have
people that actually liked it too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot of people loved their jobs, even though you look at it and you're like, who would do that? Why are you doing that? So, and maybe that's the answer, that some people derive a sense of satisfaction out of doing stuff that's difficult. that might be the answer. But I think in this situation, talking about energy again, that is the finite resource apart from real estate. That there's only so much room to put things on a planet. So that'll be obviously a point of contention. But energy is a thing, and it does take energy to create things and do things and stuff. And I think that'll be in the future kind of the credit, I guess, is how much energy you consume doing whatever you do. Maybe, I don't know. It's just a thought.
Or how much energy everybody's allotted as a person. I mean, obviously you would have to be looking at like a government system on a global scale to manage this at the very least, you know, because you can't do it with nation states. At least I don't think so. I don't think it'll work out very well, given especially the current state of the nations on this. I mean, we are nowhere near being close to having our own global government aside from just that organization of NATO. But you know, that's going to get into a different subject, and I better just stay out of that. We're talking about working those jobs and everything, and so another aspect. So again, I'm not an economist. I'm a Star Trek fan, and I just know a lot about various aspects of Star Trek. So those are my credentials. You know, I don't have a degree in Star Trek, but I probably could apply for one and pay for one online for $100 and get one if I so decided to. But one of the things is that when it comes down to labor, to make the post-scarcity economy work, a lot of the menial jobs would have to go to artificial intelligence and robots anyways. And we were talking about that and what happens if robots build machines, bigger machines. I mean, we're going to have to QA them at some point and make sure that they're not busted, but you get rid of all of the, not all, but you get rid of most of the menial jobs. And then of course, you know, you get rid of farming because you can replicate your food. So there's no more farming jobs. There's no more, there may not be even any more garbage collector jobs because you would
You're
simply
recycling it into your replicator.
recycle it in. I was watching an episode of Enterprise yesterday, first season, because I'm binge watching that right now. And it was the episode where they get some letters from school kids on Earth, and Captain Archer goes around and gives everybody on the bridge crew one question, and they get down to Trip, and it's like, so what happens to human waste? Where does it go? And he's like, Captain, you really gonna have me answer this poop question? And he answered it, and it is exactly what they do in Star Trek. It's broken down and recycled and turned into other material, and that eliminates a lot of environmental impact in a lot of cases. And so there's so many different things to make this work in humanity in general that is going to require such a massive transformation of how we do things and our infrastructure and you know, just I guess world economies and governments and politics and everything else, you know, it's going to take generations to get to that point. And I don't mean the movie itself, but you know, it's going to take a very different mindset. We'll go back and look over Star Trek's history, like how did it happen? How did they get there? And I think it all started after World War III. They had the big giant nuclear holocaust and everybody was living in communes, and you got drunk old Zefram Cochrane dancing to Roy Orbison and building newfangled rocket ships, and he's just trying to make a buck. That's what he's just trying to do. He's trying to survive and make some money and profit off of his design. Once they get that antimatter reactor built for a warp drive, that changes everything. There's your source of energy. I mean, we don't even have fusion reactors that are effective to the point where they produce more energy than it takes to actually produce the fusion itself. And you know, the physicists are saying, well, maybe 30 to 40 years down the road, we might get there. I bet you if there's a major world catastrophe that happens in 10 to 20 years, they'll get there a hell of a lot faster once they
Well,
put enough money into it. So,
Yeah, the main drive of innovation is need. You know,
right.
the needs muster the devil drive, or whatever that saying is.
needs must as the devil drives. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
must.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any, proverbial Nazis that we're trying to defeat right now. There's no real Hitler who's causing genocide in the world. We don't have an imperial Japan causing havoc in the Pacific. So we don't have those types of problems in our world. Our problems, I think, today are primarily related to disease and hunger and the haves and the have-nots, and the people who have everything. uh, and this can get into a conversation about, well, how does the political system evolve from capitalism into a post-scarcity situation? And, do we have to go through the steps and go through like a full socialist situation, which scares the hell out of a lot of people in this country because they hear that word, they don't understand what it means, and they're like, oh my God, we're going to have to become socialist, and they hate God, and we can't do that. There's going to have to be a lot of changes in humanity itself to get out of this hole we're stuck in. I would love to wake up in the morning, give my daughter a kiss, go do something I enjoy, come home, have a nice meal, and, there's still a roof over my head. And, I don't need, a house that has 18 bathrooms in it. I don't, it's just stupid. I'm simple, I'm utilitarian. I'm sure there's lots of people who would be like, oh yeah, well, if I could get anything I wanted to, I'd buy like 15 Ferraris, and I'd, live it up like the Kardashians, not the Kardashians. I'm trying to include Star Trek in this as best as I can. But, there's just so many things that have to change with humanity to get us there. And reading the news every day, I don't see it happening in our lifetimes. I don't see it happening in my daughter's lifetime.
Yeah.
Maybe, and who knows, maybe we need to have some kind of a big thing. Maybe global warming needs to happen, to take effect, to get us all, convinced that, hey, we've got a big thing that we all need to focus on together as a species in order to survive. And then maybe things will start to change.
What if that tipping point is an alien invasion? That could be a thing too. That would certainly bring people together.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably be the only thing that would unite the whole world, is something otherworldly.
Yeah.
But it's funny that, there's enough liquid wealth just sitting around that could actually fix a lot of problems that would speed us toward this goal. But even more important than that, there's an abundance of the manpower to actually do it. Like, if you took away money and profit and all of that stuff, long ago we would have had plenty of people to produce for the need.
I've got to take her for a quick potty break. I'll be right back.
No problem.
Yeah, continue to do what you want to do. If you want to pause and edit, that's fine. Hang on a second.
Oh, that's good. So I want to speak to that, actually. That the whole incentive thing, that I think if you took away all of those kinds of needs, the struggle to survive is actually what creates the innovation that we have today. The challenges, the defeats, those kinds of things, that's what creates the innovation. And I was going to talk when Randy was bringing up the point about World War III, that could be the point where this kind of thing happens. The innovations that happen, if you look at World War II, we in those few years, the world changed drastically. I mean, we went from horses and propeller biplanes and stuff like that to jet aircraft and rockets and remote controlled aircraft and TV cameras and stuff. Medical technology advanced significantly because of that conflict. And so I think if you remove the conflict and the risk and the challenges that people face, I don't think we'd see any innovation. I think we'd see stagnation. We'd see people just sitting playing video games all day.
No way. If you like ask yourself, could you sit around and play video games all day? If the answer is yes, fine. But most people, I think, would get a little bored and want to do a little something else.
Well,
And the other point I have is that yes, these things like, you know, profit can drive innovation, and it does, and turmoil can drive innovation, and it does, but it's not the only thing. You know, and this also speaks to energy production. You know, we don't make a more efficient battery because we need it to survive. We do it just because it's something better. It makes life a little easier. It makes life, you know, it just improves things, you know. And
yeah, but here's the thing: those kinds of products are for sale. So if you remove that element, like, I wonder if that drive to improve things would still continue to exist.
well,
I mean, look at government. Government has no incentive to improve anything because they get their tax money whether they succeed or fail. And just look at the state of things.
do you think Australopithecus afarensis picked up a rock and another rock and said, well, I can make this do something really cool, but you got to give me something in return?
No,
I mean,
they were surviving. So that's the point. It's several things at once. I mean, obviously, you know,
that's my point. It's not just profit, and you don't need innovation to happen quickly. And if you do need it to happen quickly, it doesn't need profit to happen.
It's not, profit isn't necessarily a thing. It's more about survival and things like that. I think that's kind of the thing. My point really came back to the whole idea of challenge, that you are overcoming some kind of adversity, that you have some deficit that you're trying to get through, and that's what yields the innovation that we've seen. To some extent, you know, it isn't one thing or the other. It's actually kind of a lot of different things.
But I mean, no matter what, you'll always, I mean, like I will sit around and say, you know what, this would be really cool if it were done a little differently. It would work better. You know, that idea just comes from, you know, my particular immediate need. It's like, you know, I think it would be a lot better if it did this or that. You know, I don't, there's no intermediate there that requires, you know, an accumulation of wealth or the ability to survive. Like we've already come above the point where we're like, you know, life or death decisions are made on the daily. You know, we're not out in the plains competing with lions.
At least in first world countries, yeah.
Right.
And that's a good point. But the thing is, you and I are fairly rare, I think, as far as being driven to improve things for the sake of bettering the world. Like that is actually my goal in life, is leaving the world a better place than it was when I entered it. But not to everybody. And so
I used to be like that, though. I used to want that 5-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms, even though it's just me. You know, I wanted all that space. But now that I've pared things down and I've, you know, educated myself and I've, you know, grown more compassionate over the years, I've changed my mind, you know, and I don't think everybody's brain is set in stone. You know, I think a lot of people could, you know, kind of come around and see the light. And
well, and that's very possible. But we're speaking in the context of our current world, the way it currently exists. And so bringing it back to Star Trek, if something like that did come to pass, if we existed in a post-scarcity world, like, would people actually still pursue those kinds of ideals? And I think that I don't know that we can actually answer that until we actually experience it. But it's a good thing to speculate on.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, I know human nature, and I know that 90% of people would be sitting playing video games and watching Netflix. The 10% who are driven are going to be out there doing the good stuff, innovating, creating, building starships and stuff like that. But I think
guess you
most
could
people
say,
don't have that drive.
I guess you could say we've kind of got a social experiment to show that already, whether that's the case or not, because we've got exorbitantly rich people that don't need to work. They just make money by breathing.
That
And
was one of my points that I had listed, and it's good to be back, by the way, from the short break. Um, consider this for a second. So you take an episode of Star Trek, let's say with Harry Mudd, or that eccentric um, dealer in rare items from Next Gen who captures data.
Kivas Fajo or something.
Kivas Fajo or something like that.
Oh,
And
the Varen T
Yeah.
disruptor or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that guy. So
Yeah.
look at those and think of those of the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musks of the 24th century. Imagine, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I have it written down as like something that I had a thought about, where today, if you want to go to space, or today, if you want to be a philanthropist, or if you want to do something on your own to benefit humanity, you have to have an insane amount of money to do it. We used to have a space program in the United States funded with a large budget, and over the years, it's been cut back and cut back and cut back. They thought in the 60s we would have moon colonies, within a few decades, and off to Mars shortly thereafter, and that just all kind of petered out because humanity got bored with the moon. And other reasons too, ending the Cold War and a few other things here.
Yeah, the space program in the U.S. was largely dependent on the Cold War.
Well, yeah, we had to beat the Russians, and we don't have anybody to beat right now. But you look at Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, who have accumulated just a stupid amount of money, and before it used to be Bill Gates. And all of this is out of, accumulated from innovating and catering to humans in a way that they were able to capitalize on it. Yay, capitalism. But Bill Gates with the software, and you got Amazon.com, and you've got eBay, and all these other places where, and I want to bring my mother into this conversation. My mother has no idea how technology works beyond turning things on and turning things off. She's constantly sending me text messages and phone calls and stuff about, hey, I got this thing, can you help me do it? Or I'm trying to do this on my phone, and I don't know how to do it, because she just doesn't get technology. And what's made it worse is touch screens, because she just doesn't get that. I wish she just had a flip phone. But she never had ever ordered anything off of the internet up until the last couple of years, and she discovered Amazon Prime, and then she and she's got a Prime account, but she doesn't know how to hook that up to her Roku equipped TV so she could reap the television benefits from that same service. Go figure. So she's buying stuff on Amazon like crazy. But then again, I see people all the time. I mean, and I shouldn't, I'm guilty too. I've got an Amazon account, and I've ordered stuff off of there before, but I don't order everything. She's ordering every day. She's got a new box coming in with some other piece of useless crap in it, and it's not groceries. She's not using the grocery service. She's just buying, I don't know, junk, heating blankets and stuff.
If it weren't Amazon, it'd be QVC. So
the QVC was the one before. I mean, she used to buy a lot of stuff off of QVC. She'd, have stuff come in there. I remember the Star Trek specials I used to have with the actors on QVC when I watched cable back when I was a kid. Those were kind of cool.
Yeah. Mike Rowe was actually, I think he was on QVC.
I think he was too. I think it's where he got to start. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. And people should look up the episode or the piece that he did of the plush Ark of the Covenant. That was very funny.
Oh my gosh.
You bring up a good point. These people, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and things like that, they don't really have a need to make any more money. I mean, their needs are met.
Yeah.
But they're still driven to do something, and they're giving of themselves, their financial resources, their time, things like that, to do something they believe in. I mean, we've got this, like, we're on the cusp of private space exploration.
Yeah.
Thanks
And
to
wasn't
that.
Richard Branson or something?
Yeah, Branson. Yeah, he's another one.
Yeah.
And so I guess that kind of does say, now, granted, this is a small sample size, like, because again, I think that most people are going to stay at home and sit and eat potato chips and watch Netflix.
But here's the thing: if there's enough to go around, who gives a damn? Like,
Oh, no, that's true. As long as there's enough Elon Musks out there who are driving things, and I think there will be, because I think the human spirit doesn't depend on capital. It depends on kind of a desire to explore and challenge oneself and kind of one up each other.
I'll bring a little psychology into it. Granted, I don't know much, but there are personality types, and it's easy for you and I to say, well, we would get bored and just twiddling our thumbs, and we would want to go out and create and contribute and stuff. But there's definitely people like us with that same mindset. Like, you can't just sit around and just exist. That would drive you crazy,
Yeah. So, like you'd brought up earlier, Randy, Cisco's dad, who had that restaurant, he loved cooking and he loved serving people and stuff and
making them happy.
Yeah. And so he probably didn't, that we had replicator technology at the time, and he probably didn't need anything, but he cooked and ran the restaurant because he wanted to.
Yeah. It's
so
almost like art, it's a form of art, really, cooking.
Yeah.
You put your personal touch on it, something a replicator can't do. Somebody comes up and says, I want it spicy like you did last week. It's not going to be like, please enter the amount of capsaicin molecules that you so it all boils down to just people being allowed to experience life the way they want to, and whatever comes of that, because if you free people up from doing these menial jobs, if you free people up from worrying where they're going to get their next meal tomorrow, you might find the next Elon Musk getting us to space. You might
possibly,
you might have this not to go all Borg, but you might have this collective thinking come together from just all these different experiences, coming together with time on their hands to say, wouldn't it be cool if,
Well, I don't know about the Borg collective. I'd like to avoid that. But
me too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Yeah. The people are going to be driven to do things. And I think if you remove the need to simply go to work just to survive, you might find that people will kind of they'll grab onto that innate desire to explore and might do other things. Because yet again, we're looking at it through the lens of today. Like, we don't have a post-scarcity economy, so we don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah. I think capitalism has served its purpose. I think it's reaching a singularity, and we need to kind of get over that hump and strive for the next singularity,
again,
city world reach some kind of we need to go to other universes or something,
capitalism as an economic system is kind of more or less just the way humans interact when left to their own devices. But you're right. I think it is kind of like there's a progression going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could say, well, it would be nice if we did this or did that, and that's good, but it requires some prerequisites. And the whole energy thing, the replicators, that kind of thing, those are prerequisites to making the next big jump. And I think we're actually almost there. The 3D printing kind of stuff, we're kind of, we're infantile right now, but it's the beginning.
Transportation is kind of a budding technology. They've actually moved some molecules around. So
Read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe in 100 years, maybe not in our lifetimes, but soon we'll hit that point, and I think it'll be a game changer.
Look where we've
It'll
gone.
happen.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say it'll happen on its own. We don't have to direct it. It'll just happen because things are no longer scarce.
Mhm.
So you hit that point, and I think we'll just become more Star Trekian.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 20th century, we went from what is it? Women with these massive hoop dresses riding these funky-looking bicycles to connecting the world by airplane
And the
on our
internet.
basis, and the internet. The internet was one of the probably the major things that we've ever done as a society, I think, because it allows stuff like this, and it allows people to, oh my gosh, just exchange information and
sharing ideas and
sharing ideas
is probably one of the most significant things of the last century.
Be Nikola Tesla, like that guy had all these great ideas and he just wanted everyone to have it,
totally.
But then Thomas Edison was right by his side wanting to steal everything to make a fast buck.
Yep.
And electrocute elephants along the way.
He was such a nice guy. What a chump.
And all of it was built around patents, which are effectively just a way of saying, I want credit for this, but I also want money. I foresee a future where we replace patents with just crediting people. Like, look at this person. They created this great thing that everyone's benefiting from. How great are they? And that feels good.
Yeah. And actually, kind of tying in replicators and 3D printing and stuff, there's a site called Thingiverse where people upload their 3D printing or there's a whole bunch of different things on there, but 3D printing is kind of the dominant force there. But there's no patents. You just have an idea, you put it up, you put up the STL file, and anybody can download it and modify it and print it out. And people share ideas, they improve them. And it's sort of like this ever evolving kind of world. It's really cool. And
look at what we got. Open source, torrents, all this stuff is basically just sharing things.
Yeah. And I don't want to invoke my hacker ethos from my anarchist days back in the 90s, but all information should be free. There you go.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think the internet is our first big step toward that toward that goal. I think we're all connected now. We're all able to share information. Those of us willing to do it, and those of us willing to skirt the capitalist system that will bring the hammer down if they catch you. But
or the communist system of China that brings the hammer down if you don't agree. But VPNs circumvent all that, so we can still communicate and share ideas.
You should get a VPN to sponsor this program. To throw it in
here
to change the flavor of this a little bit with sharing of information and getting into 3D printing. There's always that one guy who's going to ruin it for everybody. Just like that one guy, or maybe it was a couple of people, who decided to make it open source for. And correct me if I'm slightly wrong on this. I'm just going with generalized information here, but 3D printed guns.
Oh, you're talking about Defense Distributed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you pay for the plan or something, or that you pay for the file, or maybe
no, it's totally free now.
It's totally free. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you can print your own gun, and it's like, well, that circumvents quite a few laws that are in place for humanity, and that might be a very interesting conversation for another one of your sessions. But there's always somebody out there who's going to ruin it for everybody in some capacity and take advantage of the system, or come up with something really dumb. And I mean, let's take Boeing for example. Putting the profit wagon in front of the airplane versus designing something that is safe, built, fabricated by machines and by humans
Mhm.
to do something for the good of humanity, which is to connect people and families across the world. But there's some guy in Chicago thinking, yeah, we're just going to do this and do that and have our guys do the inspections and circumvent the FAA and all the other stuff that's involved. But there's always going to be that human factor of greed in this mix. That's what I'm trying to get to. There's going to be greed.
Yeah, and like with Boeing and stuff, I think it becomes bureaucratic when it becomes that big, because the engineering code of ethics is to never let somebody die, and if somebody dies, you fix it so somebody doesn't die in the
Right.
future.
Right.
And there are engineers that work at Boeing, and there's probably some that have a good heart, but I think when a system becomes so complex, it's difficult to control. There's so many moving parts there.
I made parts for Boeing through another company once upon a time, and it was very hands-on, blue collar worker. They awarded catching mistakes even if you weren't working in QA. Like one time I caught a mistake before it got to QA, and they brought a fish trophy over to my station, said catch of the day. Like
Nice.
They do little things to keep you motivated to continually do better than you did before.
Yeah, and that's totally true. Because I don't think there's any sinister. Well, I think maybe there's an emergent property in bureaucratic systems that can become sinister, but I don't think any individual is sinister. So that's a good point, though, that people who are building things are always trying to make it better. Engineers, especially. And
I think it's a competition with yourself, like,
well, it is
better than,
and your coworkers and your peers and stuff like that. But they
bragging rights and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing: when a mistake happens, people are so like the 737 Max kind of thing. People are so apt to point fingers and say, "Well, you screwed that up." But we still don't totally have a firm grasp of aviation. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We're still putting our feet in the water, So if we make mistakes, that's because we're still new at it. Just like space travel. That is a very new thing. And if a mistake happens, I don't think we should berate anybody for making that mistake. I think it's a learning.
Let's bring it back to Star Trek.
Yeah,
Captain Picard. Captain Picard was very good at this. When his crew did something wrong, he knew how to be stern, but he also knew how to recognize when they realized that they fucked up. He would be like, okay, I need to tell you this is going to be on your record, but that's the extent of it. I'm not going to do everything I could do to you. I'm not going to throw the book at you. I just need you to know that you did something wrong, and you do, and it's going to be on your record, and that's that. He was very matter of fact about it, but it built this trust. It built a psychology that fostered the idea that when you're finding yourself making a mistake, you don't have to be trying to hide it or scared to bring it up. You can come to your captain and be like, I feel really bad about this, but I made this mistake. I just needed to bring it to your attention so we can fix it before things go wrong. You
shouldn't be ashamed about making mistakes, because that's how we learn and improve things. Totally. It's a good point.
Yeah, I just thought we had to bring Star Trek back.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, we were gonna. This conversation could go in so many different directions. We could take it political, or we could take it. We could talk about poverty, and all of that other stuff, which might actually be another thing to discuss too. I mean, thinking about Star Trek, looking at one of the episodes, again citing Deep Space Nine. I think it's called Past Tense, parts 1 and 2.
Ooh,
A picture
yeah.
of the 21st century around the same, I think, year, like 2020 something. And they're showing all these people and well, they're not like drug abusers or the average homeless that we might see like in the Seattle area per se, but they're people who are down on their luck, and they're corralled up in these sanctuary cities like cattle. And we're kind of going down that way with our society in a lot of respects with the homeless epidemic that we have too. And I wonder what it would be like to to introduce these types of people as maybe a first line into a post-scarcity society, as opposed to taking the haves or the average folk once it happens, to kind of introduce them to the opportunity that they can better themselves with unlimited potential. I mean, we might have a Zephram Cochrane living under a bridge in Seattle right now.
Mm-hmm.
He might enjoy the meth pipe a little bit too much, or he might have a wife that is an invalid and they couldn't afford to pay for care, and eventually things caught up and they were down on their luck and now they're in a shelter. I mean, I have friends who have been homeless. I have coworkers who have been homeless. I know of people through recovery meetings that have had issues with maintaining a home. What would it be like for these people to suddenly, experience that they have what they need at their fingertips? Would they use it?
Right.
As opposed to where it's at now, where you either got to go to the mission, which is generally a religious organization, and people are afraid of that, or they have bad experiences with that, or you've got to go to use some social services, which usually requires a waiting list and some other stuff. And meanwhile, you're just kind of stuck with handouts, and you get stuck into the old cycle of, hey, you got a buck, I need a cigarette, because that's the best you can do for the moment, because that's all you really know, and there's no hope. There's
Yeah.
no hope for these people sometimes.
Hmm.
So what do you guys think about that train of thought when it
That's
comes to this?
that's a great point. Bringing the idea of addiction into it, like that's something that certainly won't go away. The part of the brain that craves that extra dopamine or whatever. That's certainly not something that would disappear, but a lot of what drives that is circumstance. Like you were saying, like people that are struggling and trying to figure out what's coming next, what they're going to do. A lot of them feel the need to just fall back on that. um, there's another angle. If everybody had what they needed, shelter and food, and health and stuff like that, maybe they wouldn't use, or if they did, at least they probably would do it in their own home, not going out for food unless they need more food, or maybe they replicate it and they never have to go out. They aren't impacting the rest of society with their choices. They do whatever they want. If Wesley Crusher wants to put that little video game thing on and zone out and get all drugged up or whatever, he can do it in his house, and no one's the wiser. And nobody is getting held up at gunpoint, so he can afford to keep doing it because he can just keep doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So I mean, like things like that, of course, won't go away. And I think this is something that a lot of people that have these knee-jerk reactions, like we got to do something, really need to understand, is that you're never going to get rid of the world's vices. You can reduce them. You can make circumstances that lead to them better, or things like that. But you're never going to fix everything. You just make it as good as you can make it. You really shouldn't be trying to punish people for it. You should try to build them up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's way too much punishment in that area. But I was
Totally
just
agree.
thinking, if I think this would kind of weed out the folks who are down on their luck, and the folks who are there because of mental disorders and everything, suddenly they can get the care and the services they needed
Mhm.
in this, in this post-scarcity economy. And then the folks who are always going to just be on the street doing their thing, they're just going to be there doing their thing. And hey, maybe we can set up a little shack for them, not necessarily saying it's legal or illegal to be doing that, but at least give them a place to go, just like a safe injection site that they talk about on the news, where they can just be out of the way, and I'm not saying to put them out of sight, because it's not fun to watch, but just a place to go to stay warm, and maybe have access to other things. And if like for example, if they overdose and they know they shot up too much, there's some stuff on the wall they can just pull a vial out of and take it, and then they can save their life that way. I mean, that's pretty, I don't know, out there libertarianish, or whatever, but I'd very much rather see that, as opposed to what we see on a daily basis. But so
Yeah.
there's different ways. And then the other thing too, I was reading up on this, and I don't know if you guys know much about this, but does a post-scarcity economy bring with it post-scarcity anarchism? And maybe I'm going to direct that over towards Eric, because he is our resident anarchist.
Ooh. Well, okay, some thoughts during post. Seeing as how that question was asked at the end of the conversation, there was kind of a lot of pondering with no real conclusion. And after thinking about it for a while, I've since developed a more thoughtful response, which I will substitute for the boring original. You see, a lot of the justification for government comes from people's desire to have a system to manage limited resources and the conflicts that arise from people competing over those resources. In a post scarcity world, those issues would be virtually non existent. And as a result, so would the justification for having a government. So, yeah, I believe a Star Trek world would result in an anarchistic society, or maybe at the very least a minarchistic one. Perhaps in an interstellar sense, scarcity and conflict over those kinds of resources are still kind of a thing. So maybe Starfleet would be a outward facing organization rather than an inward facing one. And you'd probably see that Earth wouldn't have an official government of its own. Because, well, what would his job be? I hope that makes sense. Back to the show.
But I just when I did my research and I was reading up on this and looking at episodes and different concepts, and there's even a couple of books that have been written on this subject as well. There's an essay called "The Economics of Star Trek" that turned into a book. There's another book called Trekonomics. Those are, I think, available online for purchase through some very big website that starts with the letter A and ends with a .com, that you can find, and it goes into this in some more detail. I was looking through some of the information on there, and there's a lot of thought, because I think the people who have actually written this, at least one of them is an economic major.
Yeah,
And
Trekonomics was written by a French economist.
yeah, there you go. That's right. Yeah. And, reading just some summaries and going over a few things, he talks about, or both books kind of really talk about, well, let me look at the notes here that I have on my other screen. So, we talk about Roddenberry's vision in there. They talk about the Ferengi. They talk about system of credits, private ownership, all of those things. It discusses medicinal needs, type of like universal health care, intense personal freedom, and it covers a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, including, you know, the will to work,
Yeah.
and just to kind of recap on some of the things we talked about earlier, and having a passion for something and going for it. And in listening to everybody talk and cover everything, just to kind of throw a personal spin onto this, as a human who was born in the late 20th century, who grew up watching Star Trek 4 all the bloody time because it was at the local gas station VHS rental shelf, and mom just kept renting that for me. And Howard the Duck, by the way, that's the other one. Watching that and remembering the scene and not understanding it until I was a little bit older. Kirk walks in and he takes his glasses into the pawn shop and sells them and gets $100. And he says, "Is that a lot?" And the
Star Trek
pawn,
4,
Star
right?
Trek 4, yeah.
Yeah.
And the pawnbroker's like, "Eh." And so they take the money, they div it out. Now they got bus fare, and then they go on the bus and they walk out. And Spock turns to Captain Kirk and says, "What does it mean, exact change?" And so those things were over my head at that was 86, so I was 5 years old, because I watched it in 87, 88 as well, so over my head until I saw that later. But as somebody who is a child of the late 20th century, who's grown up watching television sitcoms, who's gone to college, who's traveled different places in the world, how should I word this? I remember when I was out of high school and going to college, and I had the world at my fingertips, and I could do anything that I wanted to if I worked hard enough for it. And I think that's kind of the way some things are set up today, but not all things, because there is a limitation called the SAT exam, which I don't know if that still exists anymore, but I had to take it, and my score was kind of in the middle, which limited me on to what classes I could take. And then that followed up with getting student loans. So I had offers from the military to do their ROTC program, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll just pay for all of your college and back, even like go back and pay for what you've already paid for if you sign up and do a career with us and whatever." I'm like, okay, well, my life goal is to get back into aviation right now. That's what I'm trying really hard to do. I mean, I'm in it. I'm just not working in it as a job because I still need to get a few more hours. But, I was thinking, great. So I could get a flying spot, do 4 years active, 4 years reserve, and then transfer that over, and then, get some kind of a flying gig and proceed with a career that I would thoroughly, immensely enjoy. And after about 2 years of attending ROTC classes in college, I was in junior ROTC in high school. They said, "Well, guess what? Here's your contract. We're going to pay for all of your college that you've already paid for and everything else you have to complete. Here's all this good stuff, whatever, blah, blah, blah." Made it look really, really nice. And at the very end of it, it's, "Well, when you graduate college, you're going to go straight to infantry school."
Oh.
And I'm like, no. We're doing this for a fixed wing flying job, flying generals around from military base to military base, a non-combat role to, because the Army has an actual fleet of business jets and smaller planes they use for their own internal purposes. That's what I wanted to do to take that baby step up. And they're like, "Nope, sorry, our needs in 2 years are going to be infantry, so that's where you're going to go." Well, I had a classmate who got transportation, and he's now a lieutenant colonel. He's been to Hawaii and North Carolina and Germany, and he's in Germany right now. And he's been to Iraq 3 times. I'm not trying to make this political by any means, but what I'm trying to say is you get somebody who is blossoming and they have all these possibilities out in front of them. How do you decide who gets to go into the university and become the next astrophysicist? Do we all just line up and go straight to MIT and just bombard them? Or do we take tests? How is the further betterment of our society going to be regulated for higher educational purposes? And I get it. Not everybody wants to be a doctor. And at that time, you may not have the motivation to want to go through some of these career paths because you won't have to. You know,
Yeah.
you could do whatever you want, you know. And for me, I hate needles and I hate blood. I'm the worst person you would want to become a doctor, let alone maybe a medical technician. I mean, I have to lay down on a gurney to get a blood draw done, and it's, you know, absolutely insane. Um, but who determines what determines who gets to do what in the future? I mean, and considering the fact that a lot of the menial stuff is going to be replaced with AI and robots, so you don't have to, you know, if your father was a garbage man, you may not have to be a garbage man. You may be a nuclear physicist. You may be,
Mhm.
you know, a lunar colonist, or you know, an antimatter generator technician, or some kind of a job like that.
Yeah.
But do you just say, hey, I want to do that, and then you get all the training you need? Because considering human genetics and how we learn and how our personalities are, like me, not everybody's good at math, and so they're not fit for certain types of jobs. Not everybody is good at other things. Some people have phobias and psyches and other things going on where they wouldn't be a good mix for, like, you know, being a person who scales tall buildings and cleans windows, which is probably something that will be replaced. But still, it's just, you know, who gets to determine that?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, you know, going back to the well, are you going to be a starship captain or mobile infantry? You know, you
Right.
went from Star Trek to Starship Troopers.
Well, I think that speaks to hierarchy, which uh, almost in most situations would kind of be irrelevant, I think. And I think some of these books kind of speak to that, like the naval aspects of Starfleet are almost decorative. You know, like there's really no, you know, there's no financial gain to rising the ranks and stuff like that. You know, it's all passion. You know, you don't really see people getting thrust into astrophysics when they wanted to be tactical. You know, like it's more like people go to Starfleet Academy, learn what they want to learn, and Starfleet finds a way to maximize on that.
And they did speak to that in Star Trek quite a lot. Like, you know, you are better fitted for a different job.
Yeah,
And I think in a post-scarcity system, you'd have a lot more opportunity to pursue what you want and experiment and try
yeah,
things,
and
which
like no
is
matter
probably
what,
good
yeah, no
because,
matter
you know,
what,
a
you
lot of people
something.
they would like, they have a vast interest in things like space travel or engineering or something like that, but they have to make ends meet. So they work at McDonald's.
Mhm.
And here you have somebody working at McDonald's as a cashier who could be an astrophysicist.
Yeah,
And, you know, so that's where I have a lot of hope. Like, I do believe that we will eventually reach that point, the Star Trekian um, kind of world where, you know, we have replicators and teleporters and warp drive and stuff like that. And when we do, I think, you know, all of us can speculate about what it's going to be, but it's going to be something we can't imagine.
Hmm.
It's the
Yeah.
same thing with all futurism. You
mhm.
know, back in the 60s, as we were talking about earlier, we thought in the 90s we'd be on the moon and on
Right.
Mars and stuff. It's totally different than that. And
Yeah,
so you know, you can hypothesize about how things are going to turn out, but it'll never be quite what you imagine today
yeah.
because we can only look at it through the lens of today.
It's funny
And
that one guy made a sci-fi series in the 60s and did way better at predicting the future than Popular Mechanics did.
oh, you're talking about Arthur C. Clarke, right? With 2001 and 69.
Sure. But I was
Okay.
going for Roddenberry considering the theme of
Oh, okay. All
Oh,
right.
okay. Because I thought we
Well,
were kind of leaning towards Arthur C. Clarke in 2001 based on the vibe of the conversation there. I was getting some thoughts in my head about that, thinking that's not Star Trek, but, you know, yeah. You guys ever taken a look and looked at, there's a series of these postcards that were done up by a French artist in like 1910 or maybe even the late 1800s. I don't know the specific date, but they showed what life human civilization was supposed to look like 100 years in the future, with like flying and transportation and, you know, mail delivery and all of these other aspects of daily life. And you compare them to how things are today, you know, nobody predicted the internet back then, because we didn't have the mental ability to think, you know, that far ahead. You know, all we knew is what we know, what we have today in front of us. Those other innovators hadn't been born yet. So they were taking concepts that they knew of the time, like, you know, a mailman with wings flying around, dropping letters into slots in an apartment and then flying off to the next one, much in the same way like a bee pollinates a flower, because they didn't have any other concept as to how that would work. You know, instead of like,
Yeah.
well, people were going to get messages on a screen because email, or somebody talking to somebody on a big phonograph speaker, and like I guess they had a concept for television at the time, but it was really awkwardly looking. It's, you take a 1920s record player with a big speaker on it and put your head up to it, and you're looking at a screen over there, and it's kind of funny looking. Or,
Yeah.
you know, the future of transportation. I mean, people once thought that airships were the way to go across the Atlantic, because the way to cross the Atlantic was by ship. So therefore, airships, that makes sense. You know, ship is the
Oh,
ship.
Actually, the
totally missed the Zeppelins. Oh my God. I
Even
wish
the
I
lead
had
ones.
experienced that. Oh.
actually the big phonograph up to the ear thing, isn't that Beats by Dre?
That
Oh my God.
yeah, or carrots by Farmer Joe. I don't know. That's just that's another joke. But yeah, so the concept that they had of what the future was going to be like, was just, it looks comical. If you ever get a chance to look at these, do a Google search and find some. They're on a couple of different websites. It'll give you a chuckle, but consider where we're at today. You know, this is 2020. Happy New Year. I still have Christmas decorations I got to take home. But our concept of what 100 years is going to be like, it's not going to be what it's going to be like you were
No,
saying. We don't know what it's going to be like.
you're totally right that people of today can't predict even a few years out what it's going to be like. We have no idea what people will dream up. And they're going to dream up some amazing things.
Yeah.
I think.
My favorite example is a book I read in 2005 that said, within 5 years, we'll reach a technological singularity where things will not get any smaller. They will not get any better.
Oh God. Oh, the singularity. Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll skip that and make another episode about it. Yeah.
I want a microchip in my brain that I can, you know, have transmute things into my, you know, retina, so I can like not have to look at my smartphone, and I can cross the street
You're
without
talking
having
about
to.
Johnny Mnemonic.
Right? Yeah.
I need to get online. I need a computer.
Yeah. Except, you know, I want it 24/7. I just want to just like be able to think. I need to check my email. There's my email. I need to,
Well,
you know, that kind of a thing.
and the funny thing about Johnny Mnemonic, the hard drive capacity he had in his brain is like laughable by today's standards, and that was the future. So you know that, yeah, like I think we look at things from what we know today, and I think it's important to realize that like what you know today, you can't imagine what it's going to be like tomorrow. Somebody's going to come up with something innovative, something new, something that is totally world changing, and nobody's going to predict it. 2001 was probably about as close to predicting the future as you could get, I think. But that's the outlier in that regard.
I just had a random thought. We need to get Randy here to speak with our previous guest, Doug Wacker, about how the connectome is like Data's positronic brain.
Oh man,
Okay.
yeah. Let's do it.
We could do that.
Oh,
I'd love to do that. Yeah. What was it that I saw on the news the other day too? Just thinking of, you know, space travel in our time. I guess somewhat related because it's a Star Trek thing. I guess Shatner called up an astronaut at the International Space Station, and then I
Oh, isn't
thought
Shatner going into space?
yeah, that was the other part, is that I'm trying to find the article here and read through it to find the exact thing that it says. But I saw a headline that says Shatner announces he's going into space, and he's like 88 years old.
Yeah. And
You
he said
know,
he doesn't care if he dies, and all I can think is he hoping to find the Nexus?
well, if he makes another Christmas album, he's not going to
Oh
find the Nexus.
I think
man.
my favorite Shatner cover is Planet Earth by Duran Duran.
Okay.
Bop,
Okay.
bop, 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 bop.
Uh-huh. Did you hear his Feliz Navidad?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I
Oh
hate
my
that song.
gosh. If you thought Rocket Man was bad, you should listen to him sing Feliz Navidad. Your ears will literally bleed. Pink Klingon blood.
Uh,
Uh, but yeah, so I mean, this is. Let me look over my notes one more time here just to make sure I covered everything. I mean, we could go so far as to talk about the Ferengi if you guys wanted to, because that's a pretty obvious example of capitalism in space. But if you watch Next Gen and then Deep Space Nine, you get to see it get transformed into more of a socialist democrat society where they go from oppressing women and profiteering to introducing workers' rights and labor unions, and women can now wear clothing. So that was kind of an interesting twist on that, but they still use money. And it was really funny. I think there's one episode where Morn dies, or he dies because he had to be dead to get his way out of uh, some kind of a theft plot. I forget the exact name of the episode, but so he fakes his death, and Quark is given his inheritance of like 1,000 bricks of gold pressed latinum. And when he ends up inspecting the bricks of gold pressed latinum, they crumble. And of course, latinum is a liquid substance, kind of like mercury, that exists in Star Trek, not in the real world, or at least not yet. I don't know. Maybe there's still a few spots on the periodic table that haven't been filled out yet, but who the heck knows? I'm not a chemist, but I have a great appreciation for people who study it. I'm just not that good in math to follow along with a lot of it. But anyways, so the gold is in there. He gets the bricks and they crumble, and he's like, "This is just worthless gold." And here on Earth, you get that much gold in your hand, and you could buy yourself a small city. And at the end of the episode, they find out that Morn has the latinum that's not gold pressed in his second stomach, and it's been stored there for years, which has caused him to go bald, which makes sense. And he spits out some into a glass and gives it to Quark as a gift, and that's his payment. And then he takes the gold, I think the leftover gold, and decides to find some small, backward, undeveloped world to trade it with, to get rid of the gold, which is kind of like, yeah, come visit us in the 20th century. We'll trade you stuff for gold like crazy.
Yeah.
Another episode too was the little green men on DS9, where they Quark gets a shuttle from his cousin, the arms dealer, and they go back to Earth. But along the way, Quark wants to take a shipment of chemosite to trade to make a fast buck. The chemosite interacts with something that happens along the way, and they end up going back in time to Roswell, New Mexico, and they become the Roswell aliens. And Quark is down there totally just scheming and just trying to take this 1950s cigar chomping general, and it's like, we can give you photon torpedoes and dilithium this and just all these other things that they have in the future. And he's trying to basically just sell his way out of there to get his freedom and make a fast buck, like what Ferengis do, just like those Ferengis in a Voyager episode that showed up in the Gamma Quadrant. Those were the ones who were out there with Geordi and that shuttle exploring the Bar's End wormhole during that one other episode, which is also linked to Federation money because the Federation was bidding on rights to that wormhole with the Barzans. And the guy doing it had a little affair with Deanna Troi in that episode, if you remember correctly. So there's one of those.
Totally do that.
See, there you go. There was one of those little enigmas there. So Federation is bidding. They're not supposed to have money, but they're bidding. So we're assuming they're energy credits. And the Ferengis are coming in and they're bidding. And those Ferengis ended up in the Gamma Quadrant. They stayed there and they set up shop on a planet that Voyager came across, and they had the whole market cornered, and they had trinkets and crap, and they had a replicator, I believe, making stuff to sell so they could profiteer off of it. And
so okay, we're actually like almost an hour and a half in now, but that's an interesting point. That what if in the Star Trek universe there isn't money as we know it today, but there is kind of a hybrid system where there's no scarcity, so you can have what you need, but you still need a medium of exchange.
Or at least a medium of exchange with cultures or people who don't have this kind of a new economy. So there must be a way to interact with them somehow. So do you take your energy and replicate something in barter?
Or maybe they need things that can't be replicated. That I think that kind of goes into the idea that they always say, well, we have no need of money and stuff. Well, money in terms of like dollars or
I think
yuan or something like that. Like it could be anything, but I think that there's always going to be something that you're going to have to exchange with somebody else, and it has to be something that is finite.
Yamak sauce for stem bolts for Latinum.
Yeah, exactly.
The Najee Consortium on DS9, they did a huge swindle thing. Or there's another episode further on where I think O'Brien needed a part to fix a Defiant fast, and Nog got everybody's access codes and swindled stuff all the way across the station to get O'Brien the part that he needed. And they called it the Great Continuum or something like that? But just a bunch of bartering, just bartering. Like, you've got this, I need this, but that person has that, and you want this, so let's try to, put something together where everybody gets what they need all in a line, and then there we go.
Yeah. Oh, can we have a moment of silence for Nog and the actor who played him?
And also Rene Auberjonois, who also passed as well. He played Odo.
Yeah. Oh, man.
There's a Soto sign in south of downtown Seattle.
And the S is out. Yeah. That's a nice tribute. I hope it stays that way for a while. I like that better than the Black Angus sign that I saw once outside of Lancaster, South Carolina, where the G was burnt out.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't have a filter. So,
well, I think you've probably got to run off here in a minute, so we should probably wrap up anyway. But I think we've got a few other episode ideas out of this one.
We'll definitely come back to this. Like, we have so many other things.
Like we were headed down the route of talking about what money is, and definitely its own episode.
Yeah, and I had the thought even, what would be money's replacement? We've used it for so many thousands of years. What's the next evolution?
Exactly.
So, earlier we commented, this could go so many different directions for this type of a conversation. And so, I hope that this create some additional ideas for you all. I'd love to be back in whatever capacity you'd have me in, whether it's Star Trek related or science or aviation, and I hinted on too earlier, recovery too as well. If you ever wanted to go down that path, I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like, that's a good point. Like, what would money look like in the Star Trek universe? Like, that could be its own episode. So, yeah, cool.
So it would be really cool to hear all the input from those who have stuck it out to the end, or whatever point you dropped off. If you got something to say it. And diving with us into Trekonomics.
And
I'm just here for the groovy music.
And everything else, like we covered so many things. Like it started off with Star Trek, but it just went in so many different directions. It was great. It was a good conversation.
Yep.
I love it. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks for joining us again, Randy.
You're welcome. Anytime. Glad to be here. Happy New Year. And we'll see you again sometime around the Great Continuum.